Welcome to Handmade History. Welcome to Handmade History. This is episode 5. I'm Alicia.
I'm Sonia.
And today we're going to go through a brief history of broom making in the United States. But before we do that, happy Halloween. We are releasing this a few days early just to be festive. So if you're listening in real time, it's Halloween 2024. I was mulling over topics that would be fun and spooky, and nothing really felt quite right until I realized we could do brooms.
The vehicle of witches.
So we're going to cover the history of broom making in the U.S., but focusing really especially on the early colonial times and the parts of the country which became New England. So let's dive in.
Okay, first, what is a broom?
So brooms are found all over the world. It's basically just some brushy stuff gathered around a stick. And you can use them with one hand or with two hands. You can use them to sweep the floor. You can use them to sweep other surfaces. They can be small or large.
We're going to talk about the origins of the broom that is most common in the U.S. It's tall, meant to be used with two hands, and it has a flat bunch of stiff bristles at the bottom. Sometimes these are plastic now, but other times they are a natural fiber, which we will talk about later.
And I found out something. You can make your own broom. Did you know this?
I mean, I guess I figured people used to make brooms,
Yeah.
But like now, I see people make brooms for Halloween decorations.
Yes. But people actually make their own brooms to use for sweeping or for rituals. And actually, the reason I found this out is because somebody wrote an article for the publication that I have written for also called Craft Industry Alliance. And it was all about modern broom making, and it had like classes and kits. Pretty cool.
That's cool. So broom making has a long tradition here in the U.S. and everywhere. So one modern broom maker, Alyssa Blackwell, said in an article, "Sweeping is a universal human act." So we are going to begin with written and oral histories of broom making in the U.S.
Yeah, so that's how I kind of landed on this time period, because broom making is so universal. You can find it at all like moments of human history, basically. So prior to the colonial era, Native Americans made brooms because everyone in the whole world makes brooms. Plants that are native to the United States that can be used to make brooms include beargrass, panic grass, and something called side oats grama. Broom handles can be made from sassafras, hickory, oak, maple, sycamore, or hawthorn. And you can also use cholla cactus, yucca, mesquite, white oak, pecan, and eastern cedar.
In the colonial era, broom making became associated with Native Americans, and there's a few reasons why. So Native Americans were displaced from their original homes. Communities were destabilized because of disease and massacre. They were forced to participate in a new economic system that they were not allowed to create themselves, and they were excluded from white society, and they were not hired in local jobs. So they had lost their land and thus couldn't become farmers, which was a big part of the colonial American economy. So broom making provided one of the only means to make money that Native Americans were allowed to do in this new system, along with basket making, chair bottoming, and mat making.
Yes. And a lot of the following comes from a really great article I read on the Colonial Society of Massachusetts, which we'll link to in the show notes. Why broom making? So why did Native Americans choose this along with those other crafts you just mentioned, Sonia, chair bottoming and mat making and basket making? And this was a place where Native skill met white colonial demand, because as we mentioned above, sweeping is a universal human need. And so people always need brooms, and materials for broom making were foraged instead of grown. So anyone could access them, whether they own land or not. The skills you need to make a broom are, quote, not hard to learn, but they do take time to practice well. But it doesn't take a long time to make brooms compared to, say, growing a field of corn. So this was a craft that could be done seasonally, which allowed people to diversify their income. So original sources mention Native American men and women peddling brooms in one season and baskets in another. Brooms can also be peddled on foot, and they provided a regular source of income. Because brooms wore out and are so necessary, Native Americans could do a circuit visiting the same people over a period of time. So a great kind of summarizing quote I read, many Native Americans utilize local natural materials to earn livelihoods that in turn help sustain their identity as Native Americans.
For many of the same reasons, other marginalized or disadvantaged groups also made brooms or similar handcrafts we mentioned before, like map making. Some examples included poor white families with no land, families of mixed race who were excluded from other economic opportunities, formerly enslaved Black people, and people with disabilities. So, how brooms were actually made. They were called Indian peeled splinter or just birch brooms. They were made from one long piece of wood, usually ash or birch. It would be both handle and broom. So the ends were slivered over and over again until there was a thick round broom.
Yeah, so that was the typical broom I read about that Native Americans would sell and these other marginalized groups. So now we're going to talk about the commercialization of broom making in the United States, but I wanted to note two things. First, Native Americans kept making brooms even after white American manufacturing of brooms became more dominant. I saw a watercolor of 3 Maliseet women peddling brooms from the 1820s. And then in at least one instance, it was recorded that Native Americans had locally respected hereditary rights to cut down any trees they wanted to make brooms. This was in Windsor, Connecticut. So this handcraft was also a vehicle for Native Americans to retain some agency over land that they had lost to colonists.
Now we'll go over the early commercialization of broom making in the U.S. So Levi Dickinson, a farmer in Hadley, Mass., planted broom corn, also called sorghum. Broom corn is the natural fiber we mentioned earlier. The plant looks like corn, but it is only tassels and seeds, and you can use the seeds to feed pigs. And Levi Dickinson used the tassels to make brooms. Dickinson wanted to make this a business, and he said, quote, his local broom business would someday be one of the greatest in the country.
Yes. And he was working at a time when the government was beginning to promote American trade and manufacture right after the Revolutionary War. So it's kind of interesting to think about this. Before the Revolutionary War, America was a resource exploited by other countries. And there were lots of imports, lots of exports. There was not an idea like, oh, America should be self-sufficient. But after the Revolutionary War, there was a drive among the colonial settlers to become self-sufficient as a country.
There was also somewhat of a shift in the economics of farming. If you've ever read the children's book, The Ox Cart Man, this is what people think of as the idealized colonial farmer. So the ox cart man and his family make everything they need right on the farm. Once a year, the ox cart man brings the extra things they've made, including brooms, to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which was the big city at the time. The ox cart man trades his goods, sells his ox, and buys treats and necessities for his family, like a sewing needle all the way from England and peppermint candies. He returns home, and the cycle begins again. So this is the mostly self-sufficient farm system that was going on. Even in this example, you can see there is still some international trade.
Yes. So this was kind of this idealized version of the self-sufficient farmer. So in the late 1700s and early 1800s, people started to farm cash crops like broom corn. And this meant that farmers were not necessarily farming things they could use, so they were no longer self-sufficient. So for example, you could plant an acre of broom corn and make a few hundred brooms, which you could then sell for money and use the money to buy food and other things that you actually needed. And some people didn't like this. They thought that having a more economically independent farm was safer, like more secure or more noble. But the reality was that farming coexisted with broom making. And even though Massachusetts did experience an economic boom in broom making was really a side hustle for most farmers.
Once again, the low barrier to entry allowed broom making to boom among white farmers in Massachusetts. Before the 1820s, brooms were made, sold, and bartered locally. By 1831, 7 towns in Western Mass were made more than 1 million brooms per year. Other towns began to jump on the train. They supplied broom handles. So brooms were sold in Boston and New York. A big driver of the boom was better transit, including the Boston Hudson Valley Rail Line and the Northampton New Haven Canal. The first broom-making machine was patented in 1844 by J.H. Hinton, and another was patented in 1849 by J. Thomas. So this one looks like it was the flat broom press.
Yes, and we'll talk about flat brooms next. I just wanted to say, isn't it interesting that a canal made a huge difference for people? You don't think of canals as being all that
Big
important.
mouth, yeah.
But yeah,
Game changers.
game changers. So I looked at a few different patents for broom making machines, and this one by J. Thomas looks like it was the one that allowed you to make a flat broom. So the flat broom was invented by Shakers, and this broom looks the most like what we have today. So the Shakers were an American religious sect. They founded communities and lived together. They were also known for taking in and adopting orphans. But the thing that most people remember about them is that they were celibate, are celibate. This is random, but I watched a short documentary about the last three Shakers who were living together. And you learn in the course of the documentary that one of them has fallen in love with a photographer and left. So then there were only two Shakers left. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. There's still only 2 Shakers left, I think.
You think so? That there's only two? We should look this. We should.
That's what the Google said. There are only 2
There's
Shakers.
only two Shakers.
The New York Times.
Oh my goodness. But so now there's a lot of museums about the Shakers. So the Shakers were started by Mother Ann Lee and others. And one of her quotes is, "Good spirits will not live where there is dirt." So they had a reputation for cleanliness and for quality made goods. Like people buy Shaker furniture because it lasts a really long time. So a community in Watervliet, New York, grew the first crop of broom corn in 1798. First Shaker crop of broom corn, I should say. And they invented the flat broom press after that. So I'm pretty sure that J. Thomas is that Shaker. And the style has really lasted.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk a little bit more about broom making in the mid 1800s in New England.
So despite the boom in broom making, there weren't any broom moguls in Massachusetts. Broom making remained a fairly egalitarian undertaking. In Hadley in 1841, there were 41 broom making businesses, and most were owned by 1 to 2 people that were usually related to each other. So 12 were one-man micro businesses. One had 11 employees, the rest had 6 or less, and only 11 full-time broom makers. The rest were farmers. So this is how it worked. A farmer would plant some broom corn. They would open a broom shop. They would hire other young men to do the work and run the shop, and the other men might live on the farm. A lot of the times, the hired men were immigrants, including some from France, Ireland, and Canada. And again, broom making was a way into the local economy.
I thought that was a fun snapshot because reading about these very small businesses just reminded me of so many people who have a small handmade or related business.
Yeah.
And yeah, I liked reading about the micro broom businesses. It's like always, we think of it as like a new thing to have a side hustle, but actually these broom makers had side hustles.
Yeah.
Broom making could also be kind of substituted for land. So if a farmer had too many sons and didn't have enough land to give them, he could give one of his sons the broom making business. And this maybe prevented some younger sons from leaving the communities to seek their fortune. And it might be a reason why all the broom makers listed in this census were men, because women can easily make brooms. Nothing prevents a woman from making a broom. And it's really just more likely that women were making brooms and not being paid or credited.
Broom making in Massachusetts peaked in the 1850s and 1860s, but it declined after the Civil War. So there was better transit to the Midwest, and broom corn grew better out there. By 1895, only 8 broom makers were left in the area.
That was kind of the end of broom making in New England. However, the United States remained a major exporter of brooms. In 1897, a Scientific American article said, "We send brooms to Central America, South America, and South Africa, to the United Kingdom, and to France and Germany. We used to send them to Australia, but now we send broom corn in machines We send now and then a little lot to China. So I thought that was delightful. In 1939, the United States produced 7 million dozen brooms, but the brooms were made and the broom corn grown in states like Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, the Appalachian region, which includes parts of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi.
By the 1950s, synthetic brooms started to be made. Over the next decade, broom corn began to be imported from Mexico because it was so much cheaper. Broom making experienced an overall decline in the U.S. until 2020, when the pandemic revitalized broom making, and broom sales in America went up by $10 million that year.
Yeah, so the pandemic revitalized local, homemade American broom making.
Interesting.
What do you think about broom making, Sonia? Do you want to try it?
Not particularly. I did think it was interesting though about how much, I didn't realize how much of an economy it was. Like I don't know. I guess I didn't really think about how people made brooms. I guess I thought it was more the foragings. I didn't know about like broom, corn.
Yes.
And just like how many farmers are making it. I do think that's interesting that it mostly stayed local until it was actually manufactured.
Yes.
Which is cool.
I did not expect to write so much about broom making in Hadley, Massachusetts. I really expected this to be more about like broom lore, which there's a lot of, which I think we could cover in another episode. But yeah, then I kind of went down this rabbit hole because it's kind of an interesting case study. Like how does something become a like economy? What changes? What do you lose? What do you gain when things shift like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full cycle in like 100 or a couple hundred years. And then.
Yeah, it really was a short period of time too.
Now we don't really think of it as its own like business. It's just you get a broom at a store.
Yeah, most people do that. But I have to say, doing the research for this, I came across some very beautiful brooms.
Yeah. I'll have to Google it now.
Yeah. Look them up. They're lovely. There's a lot of like artists who really make some gorgeous, very pretty brooms. Before we go, I wanted to shout out Folkwear Patterns. They're a small company based in Asheville, North Carolina, which was, of course, devastated by Hurricane Helene. And they are an excellent pattern company that makes historic patterns that you can make and wear with lots of instructions for modern sewists. And we are not sponsored by them. We just think they're awesome. And it's a good time to support a company in North Carolina. So thank you for listening. You can email us at handmadehistoryhosts, that's HOSTS @gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, what you think about brooms, ideas for new episodes.
If you made a broom, send a picture of your broom.
If you've made a broom, send us a picture, yes. And you can follow us on Instagram at Handmade History Podcast. Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Like, I don't want to talk that much. All right, your turn.